Now, the whole thing took an interesting turn. We didn't really, when we were writing the book, it never occurred to us we were going to get into the Kennedy assassination. But this stuff came across our desk that we didn't know about, which is that Khrushchev's son Sergei says that after the UN announcement, his father reconsidered and decided that he was going to accept Kennedy's offer to go to the moon together. He put the timing of that in late October or early November of 1963. Now, Sergei Khrushchev is pretty much an impeccable source. He's a fellow at a diplomatic school at Brown University, an Ivy League school. He is definitely a scholar. There's no doubts about it. But what happened was the whole thing was scuttled when President Kennedy was killed about 10 days later. We all know the story. What we don't know, maybe, is this was the last National Security Action Memo that John F. Kennedy ever signed. And what he says in it is that I want you, Mr. James Webb, the director of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, to start creating an office where we will start sharing information with the Soviet Union, our space and technology information with the Soviet Union, because we're going to go to the moon together. Now, the president would not have done this, given the political opposition, unless he had a hint or an indication from Khrushchev that he would accept the offer this time. There's no question, presidents don't do this kind of thing. So he's actually issuing a memo saying, apparently, that we've got agreement. We don't have any documentation that says that he did agree, other than Sergei, his son, says he agreed, and then Kennedy started acting this way. Now, there's a second memo dated the same day, which the authenticity is not necessarily established, but the guys who study the MJ-12 documents, and if you're into UFOs, you know all about the MJ-12 stuff, I believe it's Dr. Wood, has found this document which says, to the CIA director, which first of all indicates that I've already talked to NASA about sharing information, and what I want you guys to do in the CIA is to tell them everything we know about UFOs so they won't get mixed up between what's a bona fide UFO and what's one of our test aircraft. So I think that Kennedy was perfectly acceptable to these people, to the secret societies that he had basically drawn a line in the sand with and said he was going to go to war with, until he actually got to the point where it looked like his dream of going to the moon with the Russians might actually become a reality. 10 days later in Dallas, he was dead. And again, there's all kinds of Masonic connections to the assassination. This is a picture that's very, it's actually a screen capture that I took from a film called the Marie Muchmore film of the assassination. And it was in a video I hope to show you, but I ran out of time. And it shows President Kennedy literally at the moment he's being killed. If you look at his head, what you can see is that his hair is being brushed back. There's a spurt of red here, and it's not very red on the screen, but it's really obviously red on the computer. And clearly, to my mind, it indicates he's being shot from the front. If he had been shot from the back, like all of the medical evidence supposedly says, the back of his head would already be distorted. There would be some sort of distortion. It looks to me certainly like he's being hit from the front, not from the back. So the question was, is there any evidence that there was a conspiracy in President Kennedy's death? Because really, for our new conspiracy theory to work, there has to be at least 2 gunmen there, or there had to be some sort of connection to a conspiracy. There is a photograph called the Mary Moorman photograph, which has been studied pretty much in depth, that shows the grassy knoll. It's pretty much the only photograph that shows the grassy knoll. And some researchers back in the 1990s did some work on it. And they started looking at this area right here. And what they eventually found was a shape that looked like this. This is called Badge Man. And there's a lot of stuff on YouTube that rips it. I've been through the stuff that argues against this being a legitimate photo enhancement, and I find it really lacking. To my mind, this is legitimate photo work. And what it looks to show is a guy with his arms like this, with apparently a muzzle blast or something coming from the front, and what looks like a badge. And he's definitely got a specific, you can see his ears, his eyebrows, maybe it looks like his eyes shut, like he's aiming a rifle. And all of this is really consistent with a story told by a man named Gordon Arnold. There's a great program called The Men Who Killed Kennedy. Again, this is the video I wanted to show you. I would just say go to Badge Man on YouTube, type in Badge Man or The Men Who Killed Kennedy, and watch the Gordon Arnold sequences there. And a lot of people have tried to attack Gordon Arnold, who's since passed away, but basically his story was, I went to Dealey Plaza, I just got out of the Army, or I just got out of basic training, I was in my Army uniform, I thought there was going to be a parade, I started taking pictures, I was up on the grassy knoll, and I realized it was the president, and the next thing I know, a shot, like a rifle shot, went past my left ear really, really, really close, and I hit the deck, and a man in a policeman's uniform came around the corner, and he pointed the rifle at me, and he said, were you filming? And I said, yes. And he said, give me your gun, give me your film. I gave him the film, I wouldn't give him my camera. and the man had no hat on, and he had dirty hands. Now, a lot of people have argued that on another occasion he said dirty fingernails as opposed to dirty hands, and that somehow that discredits his story. But if you watch the video, and I really encourage you to go watch it, to my mind his reactions are really, really genuine when you watch the guy. In other words, I believe his story. And the thing about his story that's really important is that all this information came out, this specific story about a man in a policeman's uniform with a rifle with no hat on, came out before they ever did these badge man photo enhancements of the Mary Mormon photographs. There's no way Gordon Arnold could have known about the badge man stuff before he actually told his story. Here's an outline of what they eventually decided might be Gordon Arnold. Here's a close-up of it. Here's the badge man on the left. Here's what might be Gordon Arnold on the right. He looks like he's holding a camera. He's got a little pointed cap on, which is the kind of cap he was wearing. He's got a little medallion on it. In other words, it's all consistent with the story that he tells. There's another picture of another man back there. And again, you see that this is a guy that looks to be in a policeman's uniform. There's an emblem on the arm. It matches the Dallas police uniform of the day. There's a badge. There's a guy with a no hat on. Okay, just give me 1 minute. Now, the creepy thing about it is that somebody pointed out on the internet that this guy, badge man, has the same sort of male pattern baldness as another gentleman, this guy right here. This guy is a Dallas police officer named J.D. Tippit, okay? I'm not saying this is J.D. Tippit, and I'm certainly not implying that J.D. Tippit was part of the assassination, but it's pretty creepy to me how close they look alike. I think the eyebrows, as you can see here, look a lot alike. The pattern, the baldness pattern, the ears match. It sure looks like it might be him. And the one thing that's really important about J.D. Tippit is that that same day he was murdered by Lee Harvey Oswald. And the next day, Lee Harvey Oswald was murdered by Jack Ruby. So basically, you had motive, you had means, you had opportunity. NASA, the CIA, whoever, the simple fact that Kennedy was willing to share our most important technological secrets with the Russians would have probably been good enough reason to kill him. But if you throw in the artifacts and the fact that Kennedy was going to give this information to people outside of the secret societies, the people who felt like it was their birthright to find out what was really on the moon and what was really on Mars, then to me I think you finally have a reason that's important enough to take a chance of killing the president. Now, I don't know that I can say that categorically. All I can say is a lot of things add up, and they look really incriminating to me. This is Congressman Albert Thomas, the guy I mentioned earlier. This is the night before the assassination. He was at a special dinner with President Kennedy in Houston. He went with Kennedy to Dallas. Here is the famous photo of LBJ taking the oath of office. There's poor Mrs. Kennedy here with the blood still on her dress from the president. And this guy right here is Congressman Albert Thomas. So he had a very, obviously, important position there, watching the whole process take place. And then what most people have never seen is the next photograph that was taken by the same photographer, which is this one. And what you see is LBJ turning to Albert Thomas out of everybody else there. His face is crinkled up in a smile, and Albert Thomas is winking at him, as if to say, and again, this is the guy who controls all the funding for NASA, as if to say to him, we got him. We got rid of our problem. And now we can go to the moon secretly. And that is the secret history of NASA as far as we're concerned. I want to leave you with one last thought, which comes from Sergei Khrushchev, which is that he said, I think if Kennedy had lived, we would be living in a completely different world. And I agree with that. Thanks.